Morning. How's it going? So this is our last morning of a 5-day retreat. The perception of last is different than the experience of first. And so the first day of the retreat, you had certain feelings. Maybe you were coming from work and your mind might have been a bit restless, or you were looking forward to the retreat, or you were dreading the retreat, or so there was a certain activity in the mind conditioned by first day of the retreat. Now it's the last day of the retreat, so if you've had a bad time, you'll be happy to go home. If you've had a good time, you'll still be happy to go home, and so on and so forth. So this is the conditioned world, and it's normal. And I keep pointing to this kind of question: is there something that's unchanging? And my suggestion is to abide as awareness and see what happens. So we'll watch change come and go. And you don't have to feel any particular way. You don't have to feel inspired or not inspired. That's not a demand, but to know how you do feel. That's what the practice of awakening is about. In reading the questions, I went through all the questions. I read them through, but I didn't answer them all. But then I just wanted to see what the response to my heart was, because that's what I sometimes do. I get a whole bunch of questions, and I feel a bit overwhelmed trying to answer them all. And then my mind gets busy, and I don't want to go there. So sometimes I just read the questions and then see what comes up. And this morning what came up was the question, what is the fulfillment of the spiritual life? And then the answer came, it's love. And, okay. Now, I think one of the problems we have in talking about the positive parts of the spiritual life, we have words like enlightenment or liberation, and then we have high words of Arya Pugala, and so these can be very esoteric words, which are sometimes hard to relate to. And then we can also have opinions about them, and we do, but sometimes just a kind of ordinary language is obviously helpful. And so the next thought that came to my mind was, so what is the emotional makeup of someone who's free or enlightened? And the same answer came back was love. And love not in terms of liking, but in terms of the Brahmaviharas. So what is not the territory of enlightenment, or what does non-enlightenment look like? Well, complaining is probably not an enlightenment factor, right? So when the mind is complaining, that's natural, but attachment to it would not lead to love or happiness. I mean, that's self-evident. So then the question about having a goal as opposed to attaching to a goal was a good question. And then let's say the mind dwells in complaining. One sees that that's really suffering. It's also not love. It's also not liberated, because it's very attached to conditions. And so there's a natural determination to go beyond complaining. And that's what we call chanda. Chanda is wholesome aspiration, or, say, intelligent desire. Attachment desire would be then, I kind of see that in my own character, and I see I'd like to go beyond that. And then complaining comes up in my mind, and then I say to myself, I shouldn't complain. To me, that's attachment to an ideal of not complaining. Non-attachment and right practice for me would be to say, complaining feels like this, and then try to shift my mind to another perception. So I would recognize the manifestation of the emotion I'm working on, And to me, that's the beginning of love, which is acceptance. Right? Acceptance is not condoning, but it's also not just being lost in it. So what is acceptance? Acceptance, in a way, is what we mean by metta when we talk about the conjoined nature of awareness and acceptance, or awareness and kindness. So accept it's a simplistic example, I realize, and life is more complex, but just to give you something you already know, I'm sure. But so acceptance of the feeling of complaining is different than I shouldn't complain, and different than complaining. So that's the middle way of knowing the way things are. And so we go back to Luang Por Sumedho's, it's like this. But it's an awakened. But then from that I can make right effort. I can inquire. I can develop some samadhi around the mind doing that, and then I can change perception. I can go to another mode of thinking. That's all very well and good, but it's coming from a mind which knows the way things are. And let's say for me, that example was very obvious in my first years at Wabapong, where the food was very, very coarse, and there was really no sensual stimulation. There were no books, very little English language to be spoken of. So all my cultural distractions were gone. Also, living celibate, living in a group of people where I couldn't really leave. So many things, and so one of the few sensual pleasures was food, and the food was not, it was pretty rough food, and usually like dynamite chili hot. So, to negotiate the meal was something. And then, of course, my mind would complain. But what else could it do? It was used to refined food. It was used to more choices. So it wasn't, again, like I say, it wasn't my fault, but it was my responsibility. And then Luang Por Chah, and just the teaching of the Buddha, would teach contentment with little is a virtuous practice, and that's obvious. Contentment with little, and so then I think I tried to be idealistic and say I really enjoy this food. That didn't work. But then I started to look at the peasants and the farmers, and boy, they worked hard. They worked so hard, and they were so kind and generous, and this was the best they had to offer. And of course, that perception started to shift my mind in a way of authentic gratitude. It wasn't just something I put on top of it. So, but still, the habit of wanting more than I was getting was certainly there, and the food sometimes didn't have much protein, so I'd have egg dreams. Have you ever had an egg dream? Oh, it's ridiculous. Who dreams of eggs? But it's just that, craving for protein. It wasn't even a particular kind of egg. So that was just the physical reality. But my mind, I could train it, and I was sincere, and I loved the people, and I was grateful, so I could move the mind towards gratitude. But I had to, first of all, recognize complaining feels this way, unskillful, unwholesome. Start to shift your perception. So that's the difference between, for me, idealism, attachment to idealism, I think that's an important word, and reality, and then working on reality and moving towards something which is more wholesome. So then acceptance, to me, is the gateway both to the awakened mind, but the gateway to love, not the love of liking, but the love of openness to the way things are, and communion, I would say, with the way things are. Take that model then, and then consider your own work, things you're doing in your own practice as you go back to the world, and see the areas where self-view comes up a lot. So the complaining mind, for me, would just like I'd feel jealous if another monk had a bigger mango. Are you serious? I'd see this silly, childish mind states coming up, and what? But I'd never been in that situation where I couldn't do what I wanted to do, and on that. So then kind of awakening to that and accepting that and opening to that, to me that does seem like love, because it's like allowing this thing to be what it is. So in the same way with whatever you have, first of all you have to identify it as Dharma. So the feeling of complaining that I experienced, that was Dharma, that was nature. In Thai they use the word Dhammachat, which is born of Dhamma, born of truth. So there was nothing untruthful about the feelings that I was having, and they made a lot of sense from my cultural background and my geographical background and so on. So to see something like complaining as Dharma is to see it objectively. This is an object. To attach to the feeling of complaining is to take it subjectively and believe in the thinking mind. Either as self-judgment, oh, you shouldn't complain so much, or complaining, one or the other. And that's, I would say that's one model of the middle way. So whatever you're working on in your own life, start to really listen to the very strong subjective voice of self that we call Sakkaya Ditthi or Attavada, and begin to see, well, what's driving that? Oh, it's, in this case, complaining feels like this. And you're always coming back to present moment awareness. So the fulfillment of the spiritual life is love, is an interesting way to put it. What would an enlightened being, how would an enlightened being manifest in social situations? I would think it's the Brahma Viharas, right? What else could it be? It couldn't be grumpy. Maybe it could be grumpy, I'm not sure. But the manifestation of a mind, take it the other way. What would the mind which is not bound by fear, not bound by aversion, not bound by greed, and not bound by ignorance, how would it manifest? And all of us are in situations where we're not bound by greed, we're not always greedy, we're not bound by hatred, we're not always hateful, we're not bound by fear. There are times when our mind is free of those things, and isn't it true that our heart then manifests in a way of communion? Because we can now connect to people, we can see things, we can respond from a place of freedom. So I think I was saying that yesterday, I can't remember, but that kind of consideration of noticing when there isn't fear, or noticing when there isn't complaining, and noticing when there's no thought. That's very, very helpful. Coming to that again and again. It's like this. Resting in awareness, that was the phrase I used, and then to add to that, I mean, it's taken me a while to figure this out, but to rest in the heart of awareness is a language I use too. So when my attention goes up into the thinking mind, and I needn't do that. I mean, sometimes I'm planning a project, or I'm considering a problem, then I use thought. But sometimes when the thought mechanisms start igniting and self-view starts to ignite, then I find it really helpful to bring attention from the brain, literally the brain, down through the throat, and let it rest in the heart. And that I call resting in the heart of awareness. It's very relaxing, and it's always, to me, it seems, again, coming back to the fulfillment of the spiritual life being love. If one were to talk about it that way, that's the place where I respond the best to humanity, or to my own life, or whatever's around. And that can become a very, again, it's taken me a while to sort of get, well, I've been at this a while too, but it took me a while to get the heart open. So I had to go through quite a lot of negativity, but once I began to make that, be more active there, or be more aware of there, then it became a very simple practice in social relationships of seeing the attention go up into the head, into thinking, and then gently bringing it down through the throat and to the heart. And then trying to rest there in my relationships to other people. And that's very peaceful. It's a very loving kind of place to be. But it's done from it's not an ideal. It's not like I should love everyone or everyone loves me. It's not a thought. It's actually a kind of more physical sense. And it is a place where ego isn't manifesting. Ego manifests through thinking. If I can see that manifesting and then come down here, then I find, first of all, my response to people comes from a place of being in touch with the situation, being in the context. And if I can stay there and relate from that place, I get no echoes. I think one of the ways I evaluate where I'm at is the strength of echoes after an encounter. And by echoes, I mean, let's say one has an encounter with someone and you're thinking about that encounter for the next 2 days. Why? Why do I need to think about this for 2 days? Usually because I've gotten caught up with some sense of self, some aggression, some fear, and that echoes through. I think in the Zen teachings, they sometimes say like burn everything up right away. They kind of be in the situation, be with it totally, but don't carry it on. And my way of abiding or interacting or being is from the heart, and then there isn't like a whole bunch of echo or regret or remorse or all that kind of language. So that's something I've tried to train in, and this is the idea of developing skill. Wherever we're at now, we have intelligence, we're good people, we have good intentions. So that's always, I think, first and foremost in our consideration of what we're working on, that no matter how difficult your mind gets, remember, your intentions are good. Your life has meaning. Your life has integrity. These are great things. But your habits aren't enlightened, or the habits of mind aren't enlightened. So even though I lived as a bhikkhu in a life of integrity, and I was keeping very good sila and very diligent and all that, I'd still get angry, or I'd still be like annoyed at Ajahn Chah for talking so long. And so the form was good, and the intention was good, but the vipaka kamma of my habits, I still had to deal with. We all have to deal with that. And it was quite disappointing to be annoyed at Ajahn Chah, because I really loved him. But if he talked for 4 hours, and I'm sitting on a concrete floor, I just like, shut up, will you? Come on. and he'd play with us. And then, okay, oh yeah, this is what annoyance feels like. So much of the teaching with Luang Cha was these situations of frustration, where you'd be trapped in a concrete floor and mosquitoes are biting, and it's hot, there's no air conditioning, don't understand what the man's saying, and he keeps saying it, and everyone else is laughing. That was a very lonely moment. I remember once, like I was the only Westerner at Patimokkha, and Ajahn Chah's just ebullient, right? And he's cracking jokes, and I kind of get into it, and well, after a while I'm not there, and everyone laughs, and I'm not laughing because I don't know what's going on, and it's got a deep, deep lonely feeling of being alone. It's like this. It feels like this. So then I found that those situations of frustration, either I figure out how to be at peace with it, or I leave. You can leave any time, Viradhammo. Okay, it's true. And then, okay, what's the problem? Well, he talks too much. No. What's the problem? I don't want him to talk. And where do you want to do? I want to go to bed. Very good. I want to get under my mosquito net. Okay, now you're honest. This is the way it is now. But you've come here not just to do what you want. You've come here to abide with a teacher. True, okay, so some sense of honor. Okay, I'll try to learn how to be at peace with a situation which is inherently unpeaceful for me. It's physically painful, and it's boring, and so on. And over probably a year, I can't remember, so long ago, I probably figured out how to be at peace with these kinds of frustrations. But it wasn't from idealism. You can't idealize your way into peace. It doesn't work that way. It was through training. And so the training was first, again, awakening to the way things are, and then intending the mind towards wholesomeness. And that to me is the combination of sama sankappa, sama ditti, and sama sankappa, right understanding and right thinking. So the right thinking then was something like, I don't want to be here. What does that feel like? I wish Ajahn Chah would just shut up. That doesn't feel so good. Do you really want to be born into that? Do you want your monastic life to be that? So I'd query myself. And obviously I don't want that. And then slowly, yeah, but thank you for the chance to practice. And thank you for the requisites. And thank you for actually putting up with me. That kind of thing. And so the gratitude slowly became a more powerful factor than the complaining mind. And then I could be at peace. I just had to shift a lot. And then I would walk away from those situations quite okay. Actually, quite calm, quite grateful, and more happy and more ebullient from that situation. So training, this is what we mean by training. Taking the material you have, the type of wood you have, or whatever craft you're doing in your mind, and learning to awaken to it. So that's acceptance. And so that's why I keep talking about the conjoined factors of kindness or non-resistance, whatever way you want, and awareness. Because obviously, if there's not acceptance of the way things are, then I'm into some judgment, and I'm trying to get something else. Without that, I don't think right practice could proceed. From that, I certainly make intentions to develop myself and encourage more wholesome states of mind. So then the idea of anusaya means latent tendencies. So that's the idea of resultant kamma. And I don't think much about past lives. Someone asked me the other day, so have you investigated your past births? And my answer, I found my answer was interesting. I think the very problem is that I think I was born and will die. That means to me the essential spiritual problem, that I am this mind and body, and that I was born. The body was born, certainly, and the body will die. But that is my real identity, that I was born and I will die, to me would take me away from the unconditioned, the unborn, the uncreated. And then to compound that and to say that, yeah, then I was a sailor, and then I was a warrior, and then I was a woman, and then I was a cat. And, that kind of, to me it seems I'm just perpetuating a sense of self. And I've always been very cautious about taking on more self-identities, because it seems to me that's the heart of avijja, that I am this body. I was conventionally right. I've got a passport and it says who I am, certainly. But to me, awareness is something that is not born and does not die, and it's the gateway to that. So, self-perceptions I'm very, very careful of. So in terms of vipaka kamma or resultant kamma, I never think in past life. I mean, I sometimes do. I think, how did you become a monk? Where did that come from? So kind of like that, but not in any real concerted way. So I just look at resultant kamma more like childhood conditioning, social conditioning, male conditioning, all kinds of things like that. And so the anusaya that come into mind, the latent tendencies, I just say, well, there's somewhere from there. I don't try to figure it out. but they do come up. So for me, latent tendencies of fear or social anxiety or whatever were my kamma, the result, the vipaka kamma, which I had to learn from. And each of us has a vipaka kamma we have to learn from. But again, we don't do it deliberately. It just is. So that's my teacher. Fear is my teacher. Social anxiety is my teacher. And then, like when I first became an abbot, my inner tyrant arose, because now I'm in charge, and you guys are going to listen to me. So, whoa, I see this kind of character who just wants to control everyone, and that was from fear. And that hadn't really arisen before because I wasn't in a position of authority. Oh, there's my inner Führer. That's frightening. And but that's at that field. That was vipaka kamma, just the way the mind was conditioned. And I said, I don't want to go that way. I don't want to be some control freak. I don't want to lead in this way. So when that came up, I had to be very careful about right speech. And sometimes I lost it. And I would yell at people. And then I'd go back to my kuti and think I'm a complete idiot. And like, we all learn the same way, don't we? But then that wasn't my fault, as I keep saying, but it was my responsibility. And as long as I took responsibility for that, then I would grow. And again, think about how love works, that if I got angry at someone, and I yelled at them, and I misused my position, I never hurt anyone, but I could be pretty creepy, I think. But if I then got lost in the anusaya, in the latent tendency, then I go back to my kuti, then what's the first step of changing the stream of consciousness from anger to love? It has to be acceptance, doesn't it? It has to be acceptance of what I'm feeling right now, which is guilt, which is self-disparagement. You fool, Viradhammo, you lost it again, you said you wouldn't. No. Self-disparagement feels like this. So that step of acceptance is the step towards love. But it's the acceptance of anger. But it's not anger. So anger towards anger begets more anger. So that, to me, is terribly important, that sense of acceptance. And then I would just keep working, and then that habit died out. No, I'm much more mellow fellow. And it was, that's just the way we all learn. So people ask in these questions, how do I practice in lay life? Well, this is the way, isn't it? You take your difficulties and seeming inadequacies and you make them your strengths. The weaknesses of my character were much based on fear and things like that, and they became my strengths, because that's where I learned the Four Noble Truths, and that's when the heart became more and more free of fear, then there's more and more love, and more the Brahma-Vihara is functioning. So today I think the game will be 2:15. We'll have us sitting at 3:15, and then we'll do some kind of closing ceremonies. So why don't we do a sitting now? Okay, let's sit for 45 minutes or so. I won't, will I or will I not? Maybe I'll give some instruction, and then just to kind of review, let's see where we go. So let me remind you of some of those suggestions. I'm not sure if they work for you, but let's see how it goes. Listen to sound. Notice the changing nature of sound. Notice the stillness of awareness itself. Be that awareness, aware of sound. Feel your hands. Let the tactile feelings in your hands become conscious, receptive awareness. Notice the changing nature of the tactile feelings. Awareness is unchanging. It's the same awareness. Listen to sound. Perceive sound as in awareness. All the qualities of changing sound are in awareness. And feel your hands, perceived as in awareness, the body in awareness. So sound, object changing in awareness, bodily feelings, object changing in awareness. And then be that awareness, awake, accepting, knowing. So your challenge would be that how can you sustain this awake presence for longer spans of time? You might prefer just stopping and just knowing change. Sense consciousness changing. Nothing to do, but there is something to do. That's to be awake, knowing, not seeking an object. Or you might find that a bit too vague, so then you pick up the breath, and then awake or aware with one in-breath, awake, aware for one out-breath. So it's the same awareness. And then if you wanted to kind of explore that abiding in the heart, I would say bring your attention to your throat. Make conscious the feelings in the throat. Bring your attention further down to the middle of the chest. Feel the rising and falling at the middle of the chest. Chest rises, awareness with in-breath, and the chest falls, awareness with out-breath. Same awareness. And just settling in that rhythm at the chest. And then see what happens. What does it feel like in the center of the chest? Don't look for anything. Let it just be the way it is. A place of abiding. Main thing is awake, knowing for an in-breath. Awake, knowing for an out-breath. So let's just sit quietly. So then I've talked about attitudes a lot. So what's the difference between an attitude of welcoming and an attitude of controlling? Welcoming is more from the side of kindness, isn't it? You welcome the in-breath at the heart, and you relax with the out-breath at the heart. And don't be too concerned about the thinking mind. Just go back to a sense of welcoming, feeling at the heart. So it has a kind of relaxed, peaceful attitude. And of course, a huge amount of patience. So maybe just a few more words before we do walking, and I go for my dana. Around 1987 or 88, I was on the committee that welcomed His Holiness the Dalai Lama to New Zealand for his first tour of New Zealand, and that was a great honor. And he gave a talk in Wellington, I think it was. And in that talk he said, compassion is the method. And that really struck me. I hadn't thought of it that way. I guess I had subconsciously thought that compassion is the goal. And yet, that really affected me very, very well. And so the Brahma Viharas that we use in Theravada Buddhism for the ideas of love are a broad range of possibilities. So for like metta bhavana, or just metta in general, I think of acceptance, tolerance, forgiveness, gratitude, generosity. There's so many ways I like to consider that word. So it's not just metta bhavana as a technical or mechanical meditation. So they're all the ways that we open the heart. So if you say something like forgiveness, you can't always forgive right away, but you can see, oh, this is a resentment, or this is a feeling wanted to have revenge, and you think to yourself, do I really want to go down that route? And then you have to be careful of idealism. I shouldn't feel resentful. That doesn't work. And then the middle way is this acceptance of resentment and knowing it as an object, and then say, yeah, but I'm going to try not to follow that in whatever way I can. And that seems to be the method, and the method of love, or the method of acceptance, the method of compassion. There's a Christian mystic, labor activist, philosopher, French, Simone Weil, who I have read a little bit of. And I was reading something this summer, and in that she said, self-compassion is the most profound humility. Self-compassion is the most profound humility. And you can see when we're not aware and we're not taking responsibility for our inner worlds, then of course we probably wouldn't be here. We'd just be indulging in our moods. But here, the danger of self-judgment as opposed to awakening, you can see that self-judgment is still ego. I shouldn't be this way. I'm a bad person for being this way. Whereas awakening isn't an egotistical statement, it's a Dharma statement that jealousy is like this, and all these negative things. And that would be self-compassion for me. You're really suffering there. Or suffering feels this way. So that first noble truth, understanding suffering, would be like making conscious the feeling of whatever in a way which is compassionate, right, rather than judgmental. And these attitudes they're not techniques, are they? But they're ways of kind of maybe reflecting on how do I treat myself? What kind of language do I use in my own the inner work I do? Is it language of condoning my foolish behavior, or is it a language of just always being heavy with myself and judgmental and being caught up in that kind of thing? So that kind of inner listening or inner vigilance is not a judgment, it's just a heightening of awareness. And then from that you can see, is the language really compassionate? Is it really, is it in line with the Brahma Viharas? And if it's not, then you think, okay, can I have different kind of inner language, different kind of inner dialogue? So I'm going to skedaddle. I'm going to get out of here. Bita has a dana planned, so we'll go over to Bita's and then we'll convene again at 2:15, and I think we'll do an hour sitting or something, and then we'll have some kind of closing ceremony. All right? All right, we'll see you this afternoon.